Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on the Dark Matter Digital Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Cheryl Costa. And Cheryl Costa is in Syracuse, New York, resident, and a native of Corning, New York. She served in the United States military twice. She served in the U.S. Air Force as a telephone cable technician with service in Vietnam. Later in the U.S. Navy, she served as an electronics tech working with radar and advanced surveillance electronic systems. Professionally, she was a senior information assurance engineer for a top Fortune 100 aerospace company, for which she recently retired after 32 years. As a vocation, she was a talk radio personality in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area from 1998 to 2001, where she hosted a weekly radio program on Business Talk WMET, 11:50 a.m. The program was called The X Factor. For 2 hours every Saturday night, she and her guests, authors, captivated listeners with discussions of unidentified flying objects, ghost hunting, remote viewing, archeoastronomy, paranormal phenomena, spirituality, cryptozoology, time travel, alien abductions, and much more. In July of 2013, she began writing UFO-oriented newspaper column called New York Skies for the Syracuse NewYorkTimes.com. Since the launch, the column has enjoyed huge web readership and has an international following. And her website is SyracuseNewTimes.com. And please welcome Cheryl to the show this evening. Hello there, Cheryl.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good. Good to be back on the show. I've been looking forward to talking to you.
It's wonderful to have you on. It's always a pleasure. So tell me what you've been up to.
I'm writing a UFO book.
Great. Excellent.
It's called the UFO Sighting Desk Reference, 2000 to 2015 for the United States.
Nice.
Basically, basically what we're doing is we're doing a state-by-state drilling down to the county level, and we can basically tell you what every county had for sightings for every year from 2000 to 2015.
That's awesome. Wow.
It's a head-crushing effort to do because the databases, the county information on the databases is pretty corrupt on one of them and non-existent on the other. So we've had to come up with a kind of a script, software script to kind of plug in a majority of the counties based on what cities we're dealing with, and it's pretty head-numbing, actually.
Oh, I can imagine.
But we're getting there. We're getting there, and we're combining National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON data to get a complete picture of exactly what the situation is.
Excellent.
And the numbers for the sightings are going to be incredible. And the intent of the book is one to generate a reference document for other UFO researchers, because these numbers are not available anyplace else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
And how do you come up with the numbers again? Just didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to ask you real quick. How do you get down to the wire insofar as all of this calculation goes?
Well, okay, I get the database information from their sources, mm-hmm. and then I start putting them into Excel spreadsheets and things like that. But there's a lot of massage that goes into it. Because, as I said, the county data was very corrupt in one database and non-existent in the other. They don't even take county data for the National UFO Reporting Center data. So we had to actually artificially create it. I went out and got lists of cities in the counties for all 50 states, and then I built like a little dummy list that I can stick into the Excel spreadsheet and sort it in, and that way I can get most of the cities. And as long as we're dealing with moderate to full-size, very large cities, that's relatively easy. As soon as you start getting down to every little whistle stop and crossroads, mm-hmm. it gets a little tedious, but it's worth it in the end. When you start sorting the data and you start seeing the charts, you start seeing some incredible patterns. We did one here in New York State last spring at the request of a professor out in California who was looking for county data in New York State because of some research work that he was doing. And I didn't have it. I said, I'll have to formulate it. And he said, okay, fine, get back in touch with me. So by summertime, I actually had put it all together, and it was 6 months worth of work to do just New York State. But in that time, I got smarter on how to do it and everything, and now I can usually do one state in about a day and a half of the bigger states. and instead of taking 6 months to do it. But it produced some interesting things here in New York State. Suddenly we found we had hot spots we didn't know existed here in New York State.
Oh, interesting. What location?
9 of them, actually. Rochester, everybody knew that the Niagara frontier up around Buffalo, New York, was a hot spot. Everybody knew that. In fact, they call it the Lake Erie effect for UFOs. They all knew there was a very high number of things, but nobody believed me until I showed them the chart that Rochester, New York, is a hot spot as well. And as one of the New York State researchers made a comment, he says to me, "Good grief, we have a Lake Ontario effect here."
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. There's a couple places in the center part of the state and everything, and down the Hudson Valley. And I don't know, have you ever heard of Pine Bush, New York?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, Pine Bush claims to be the UFO capital of the New York State, and that's all fine and dandy and everything. But actually, 9 other counties in New York State have far higher UFO sightings over the sample period than they do.
Interesting. And what timeline are we talking about? What's the year?
Well, for that particular study, it was 1999 to the end of 2014.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, but for this new study, we're doing it from 2000 to 2015. It's still going to be a 15-year window. It's just we're going to do it from 2000 to 2015. We thought it'd be kind of nice to. My producer thought it would be very nice to have 21st century numbers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be very exciting. Okay. Have you noticed an increase in UFO activity?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's been a steady increase. Now, is it a steady increase in UFO sightings, or is it an increase in what we call the artifact of reporting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because as methods. Give an example. If you looked at the early 2000s, if you look at a chart for any particular state, it looks like there's been an increase in reporting or an increase in UFOs. And actually, from around 2000 to 2003 or 4, there was just better reporting technology on the internet. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then it levels off, and then around 2008, 2009, it spikes again. And I talked to John Ventry in Pennsylvania at MUFON, and he told me that they had done a special on television, MUFON had, and right after that there was a spike in reporting.
Interesting.
Because more people knew how to get to a website and report this stuff. So my wife is a librarian, and she's a scientific librarian, and she's kept me very honest on this because is it really truly an increase, or is it an artifact of reporting? And we've had to track this stuff very carefully.
Right, exactly. And how are these UFO sightings scrutinized insofar as if people observe a quote-unquote UFO, how do they determine whether or not it's really legit? Or do they even calculate it as possible or not possible? Or
we don't.
Okay.
In these national databases, people go onto a website, they report what they said they saw.
Okay.
Now, you probably know, and probably a lot of your listeners know, there's a standard formula out there for looking at any group of sightings, and a certain amount can be written off to mistakes in identity for clouds and weather and birds, and even a tiny percentage of hoaxes in people who are psychiatrically deranged. And then there's that percentage of somewhere between 5 and 20% that are unknown, that are exotic. Mm-hmm. Okay, and but from the standpoint of people come to me, well, how do you know these are good reports? And I said, eyewitness testimony will get you convicted in any state in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So my attitude is, if they say they saw something, I'm taking them at their word. If they're lying to us, shame on them.
Right.
It's against the law in France to falsely report a UFO sighting.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's a misdemeanor, yeah.
That's interesting.
They take it very seriously over there. Belgium as well.
Well, that's good. I think they should. Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully people are at least semi-legit with this. Now, when is your book coming out?
The discussions with my publisher and my producer, we're talking late summer, probably early fall.
Oh, excellent. I'm so looking forward to that. That's going to be great.
And we're doing it in a format where it'll be printed in less of a normal book format and more like when you get a document printed that's more of a reference document, usually got like a spiral binder on it or something like that. That's what the plan is for publishing this. It'll be horizontal format, and so you can flip up and you can have 2 pages open at once because you got the top page and you got the bottom page there, and you can flip them open. That's the plan right now.
Excellent.
From a format. So it's intended to be a reference document for people who are doing research. They could theoretically, because I do the county by county, if they do a map and they start looking at the county data for any one county in a particular state, maybe bordering into another state, you can probably do flight paths over a period of time, not necessarily for individual. We're not drilling down to the individual sighting. That information you can get from the MUFON or from National UFO Reporting Center. But what I am simply giving is the larger trend from down to the county level on a year-by-year basis with summaries and charts and graphs and that sort of thing, and tables.
Excellent. That's awesome. Well, do you include the latitude and longitude?
No.
Okay.
That information doesn't exist.
Okay.
At best, we know the state and we know the city, the town, village, or city that it was that the person reported from. That's the best information we know.
Well, that's good enough for me. What about, you mentioned the repetitive flight paths? Is there a correlation between UFO sightings and a repetitive flight path that they use?
We don't know.
Okay.
That's for somebody else to research.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like something I'd probably be interested in looking into, just to see if there's a correlation, like a galactic highway or something that they might use,
Well, when we were doing the New York State one, I shared a couple of slides. They were just simple bar charts for certain collections of counties. Okay, New York State's broken up into 10 what they call economic regions. And there's different collections of counties in each one of these 10 economic regions. And at least one, if not 2, counties in these economic regions had astronomically large numbers as compared to the other counties and things. So I'll give you an example. Over a 14, 15-year window, the other 6 or 7 counties in that economic region would have maybe an average of 10 to 30 sightings a total over this period of 15 years, where the hotspot state would have a couple of hundred over that 15-year period. Okay, and so I had shown it to my editor. I had slides. I printed slides on it, laid them all out on a big table down at the newspaper. And I said, what do you think of this? And we talked about it for half an hour, 45 minutes, and he said, I want you to check everything. I want you to check pollution maps. I want you to check natural resources maps, population maps, earthquake fault maps. Check everything. Where are the nuclear reactors in the state? Where are the military bases in the state? All that stuff, right?
Excellent.
And nothing correlated.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Nothing. And we were pulling our hair out. So finally I got a hold of Ben Moss. I don't know if you had Ben Moss on the show. He's the chief MUFON investigator for Virginia. And I had Ben, and I had met him at the International UFO Congress last spring. And I called him up, sent him down a couple of PDF files on email, and we talked on the phone, and he looked at it, and I told him everything we'd looked at, and he told me to see if I could find any ancient Native American tribal borders, tribal land maps. So we found something out there researching. We overlaid it, and it seemed like all the hot spots happened to center on each of the major Native American ancient tribal lands.
Well, that's interesting. Not a surprise, though.
No, it's not a surprise. That's the thing. It didn't surprise me. I was taken back. I looked at it and said, oh, my God, I never expected to see that. And these were colonial era maps.
Oh, nice.
So it was really strange. But we don't know what we're going to find in other states.
Right.
Because people don't know what these hot spots are. They think they do, but nobody's actually ever counted down the actual where all the hot spots are on a county by county level, which really, what I'm going to say, drills down to the physical location. I mean, you can point at a map and say, there's a county. And that county, out of all the other ones in the state, had 200 sightings over the last 15 years. What's going on in that county? You know,
Yeah, no.
Nobody's ever drilled down to this level before.
I'm really glad you're involved in doing this. Now, when you talk about these UFO hotspots over the ancient Native American tribal lands, have you noticed? Is there a description of what kind of UFOs? Is there some kind of a definition? Is it just like a light in the sky, or is there something more specific?
Okay, well, it's based on what the databases have. Okay, the databases have a list of about 12 or 15 descriptions. Sometimes it's simply a light. There's unknown. There's a disc. There's a cigar shape. There's rectangles, triangles, fireballs. All that sort of thing. Okay, and I've taken the two databases, MUFON and National UFO Reporting Center, don't really match up well, but they're close, and I'm kind of massaging the data a little bit to kind of match them up as best I can. But if we were to drill down to an individual county, I could probably give you that distribution of if a particular county had, in 15 years, had 150 sightings, I can drill down and tell you what those 150 sightings were reported as.
Awesome. That'd be kind of interesting.
I could probably give you the city that was reported from. But that's another layer of reporting that will not be in the book, but it will be available at some point. It will be available as a service if someone wants that kind of report. For a few bucks, we can generate that kind of a chart for them. Because by that time, we'll have all the data crunched in the computer in such a way that we could probably pull it out very quickly.
Oh, that's awesome. So you'll have maps or some kind of a chart available so people can purchase it.
Yes, that's what we hope to have, yes.
That's a great idea. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm always curious if there's a vortex associated with some of these UFO hotspots.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is on them. Like I said, I was very surprised when I saw the Native American overtone. Now, again, my wife will stand up and is waving at me from across the room and says, correlation does not necessarily mean causation. Okay, just because we correlated it doesn't mean that's the cause.
Right.
Okay, and that's the thing you have to that's the thing you have to remember, and it keeps you honest when you're doing this research. It's easy to jump to conclusions. If I wanted to really jump conclusions, the first thing I can point at is that a majority of the sightings are on over all of the major cities in New York State, population-based areas. Okay, that's the easy one to point at. But then again, there's these couple of counties out in the middle of nowhere that've got almost no population that have huge sighting counts on their own.
That's interesting.
And you probably want to know what county in New York State is the UFO capital of New York.
Okay, yes.
Suffolk County, far end of Long Island.
Well, that's interesting.
In 15 years, well over 500 sightings in 15 years.
That's quite a
when
bit.
The average county, the average lowball county in upstate New York in 15 years was lucky to have 10 to 30.
Wow, that's pretty interesting right there. Have you ever been tracked? When you start correlating all this information, you get the data together, do you ever have anybody in any type of government contact you about it? Or track you?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just curious, because it seems like you do some extensive work and research, so, very good at what you do.
My spouse was joking with us that, you know how the MUFON people have that T-shirt that says doing the Air Force's job since 1968?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this book is going to be basically doing the National Academy of Sciences job.
Oh, nice.
Is what it is. The government agency, Dr. Condon, remember that guy, Dr. Condon, back in the 60s, did that whole thing for Congress and the Air Force, and because of what he did, he fixed it so nobody could ever get any federal funding to research this thing. So government agencies aren't going to research UFOs because there's no money available for it, because he said that the government shouldn't be spending money on it in his report. He also fixed it so there would be no government money for any academia to go out and do it. So college professors, if there's no money, they're not going to go out and do it. So what does it come down to? Nobody's reporting this information at a governmental or what I'm going to call the academic peer-reviewed level of validation.
Right.
Okay? So what's it come to? It comes down to someone like myself, a citizen scientist, who just said, it's time to do this.
Right. Well, I'm glad you are. Yeah.
And I used to be a Buddhist nun, and, Buddhist monks and nuns, or just monks and nuns, are famous for having done all kinds of discoveries over the years, and genetics, and you name it, So it's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is. Well, I appreciate your work. There's no doubt about it, and I know a lot of the listeners do as well. It's always good to track all of this activity. I'm not one who has seen a lot of UFOs myself, but it seems like a lot of people do witness something in the skies. Then I'm wondering how much of this is connected to our military or military bases. Now, you said that there wasn't much of a connection between UFO sightings and the military bases, location-wise?
Well, okay. Remember, this is New York State. I haven't done the rest of the country.
Okay.
But I did a national chart just on raw numbers from the National UFO Reporting Database's raw numbers file, okay? And California sticks out like a sore thumb, like 13,000 sightings in the last 14 years.
Wow.
Okay? Well, a retired military friend looked at me and said, well, that's easy. They got developmental aircraft areas out there in Nevada and California. Of course, they're going to have more sightings. Of course, that's his first quick swag at it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But my flavor on the thing is that, that doesn't explain New York State because we have almost no bases here anymore.
Right.
And certainly no developmental bases.
Exactly. I agree.
That doesn't explain Suffolk County where you got 32,000 persons per sighting. People say, well, New York City's top. So, you got 2.5 million persons per sighting. I've worked those numbers before, so that's why I know them off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's what I like about you. You get those numbers down really well. You're good.
So, and, very few people in the UFO research community, over the years, I've only seen a tiny, small handful of people who crank numbers. Everybody wants to do the big story and be the Fox Mulder investigator type person. But very few people are willing to sit down and do statistical analysis, which is what I'm doing. And so that left kind of a nice niche here to write this book.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So that's kind of what we're kind of banging at. And my wife and I are sharing the authorship on it since she's got this scientific report background from having worked at the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Academy of Sciences, and I've got the analysis skills from having worked in aerospace and that kind of thing. So between us, we make a nice team for this project.
Oh, yeah, quite the compliment. There's no doubt about that. Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing that book, reading it. There's no doubt. Now, what about Montauk? There's a lot of talk about Montauk. Is there any connection between UFO sightings in that area?
Well, think about it. Montauk's out there at the far point aspect of Suffolk County.
Right, yeah.
There's a correlation for you right there. And people have been writing about Montauk for years, and my data, if nothing else, says, hey, maybe there's something to it because they've got more UFO sightings on the books than anybody in New York State.
Wow, that's really interesting.
By almost 200 sightings. Almost everybody else is somewhere between 300 sightings over that 15-year period, 300 sightings or less over that per county region, and Suffolk County has over 500. And so there's got to be, as I say, there's the old saying, if there's smoke, there's fire,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Does he ever say, or is there a connection between any craft going in and out of the water, or is it just completely in the skies itself?
Most of these reports that are in the database don't get into that kind of detail. Some of them are as simple as, they don't even sign their name. Hey, we saw our family was driving down this highway next to such and such town. We saw this. We saw 3 bright lights in the sky flying in a triangular formation, and then they all darted off. That's the typical report that we see.
That's interesting. And I don't know.
Very simple, very to the point, and usually anonymous.
Okay. What about certain times of night? Does that get calculated in or no?
I could do a crunch based on time.
Okay, I was just curious if there was a hot, like a hot area of time or a window of time where it's really active.
No, And the funny thing is, some people, I'll be the first to tell you that, as my editor used to call it, from about May through about early October was the high season for viewing UFOs in New York State. Well, it was the summer months. People are outside, and that type of thing at night and things like this. Colder months, people tend not to be outside at night.
Right.
Also, the weather gets crappy. You know what Colorado's like. It gets overcast and crappy in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas time, people are going shopping. They're not looking at the sky. They're looking for a parking place. Right. That's what it boils down to. There just isn't anything. Mm-hmm. And I've tried looking at it to see if there was a time period, but the people who are reporting these things into the database, I'm lucky if they all tell you the town that they reported it from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the data is very rough. In the MUFON database, for instance, whenever I told you the county data was relatively corrupt, in a lot of places the county was left blank because they probably didn't know what county they were in, or they got the wrong county for that town.
Mm-hmm.
And I've changed it in my what I'm going to call my scrubbed database. If I know a particular town, I'll give you an example of somebody. I had 2 different reports that said Rochester was in a different county, and I know for a fact it's in Monroe County, New York. Okay, so I changed it in my copy of the database. I changed it to the correct county. And that takes about a day to do that. There was like 7,400 records for New York State, combining National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON. There was about 7,400 good records. And I say good records. There are some that are clearly have been labeled by Steve Davenport to be hoaxes, and a few things. There's some from MUFON that have been labeled as hoaxes. And I pick those out because they've got them well labeled. Mm-hmm. And I pick them out, and I go ahead and I just flat out erase them. I take them out of the data.
Oh, good.
And then some of them have a good time timestamp logged on them, and some of them don't. Some of them have a city marked on them. Some of them will say, "Hey, I was on the highway on I-86 westbound," but they don't tell me what town they were near. Or sometimes, if I'm really lucky, they'll give me a mile marker.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But most of these things, I'm lucky to get a description. Some people will give you a good description and say, "Hey, I saw 3 objects in the sky flying in a triangular formation. They were mostly blue, but they also rotated every 2 minutes. They became red, and then they split off and went in different directions. They initially were flying from the south, going north." That's a great report because it gave you direction, told you about the quality of the sightings and the objects. The average man, "Hey, I really saw this big bright thing up in the sky, and gee, it was really amazing, and I never saw anything like that in my life." And it's 3/4 of the report is the person whining about their first sighting, and you can tell who the trained observers are very quickly.
Yeah. That's good. The detail-oriented ones are the best, I'm sure. Yeah, no doubt. Now, when you mentioned some of this in your book, you talk about 2000 and 2001, right around that window.
2000 to 2015 is the window I'm doing.
Okay, yeah. But when 2000, I'm asking, between 2000 and 2001, do you have any, is there an increase or an escalation before 9/11 with UFO activity? No, okay. I was just curious.
Not that I could see.
Okay.
During the course of what we're talking about, I'll pull my charts up and take a quick look. Okay. But while we're talking,
cool.
The only major change I saw in all of these things was there was a major spike during 2012. It was 25-30% higher than usual in 2012. But we think that was an artifact of reporting because everybody was all worried about the Mayan prophecy and things like that. More people were out. People were sensitive to topic matter, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. I was wondering if there's a connection between meditation and people, obviously doing some kind of a ceremonial thing based on 2012 and then the increase of UFO anomalies.
Yeah, I wondered about that myself. Let me take a quick look here and see if there was any kind of an increase here.
Okay.
I don't see one, to be honest with you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm looking at two different charts here. I don't see a big jump, but I'll give you here in a moment. Keep me talking, and
sure.
And I'll pull up a couple slides, and I'll tell you what I got.
Okay, great. And also, since we're right there going through this whole timeline, what is the year with the most spike activity so far?
Well, this is New York State now.
Right.
Are you talking the national sightings, or are you talking New York State?
Let's just stay with New York State.
Okay. Give me a second here. I'll tell you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. It goes like this. It starts out around 1999 through to about 2007, and the average count is between about 120 and about 200 sightings per year, averaging at around 177 per year. Okay. In 2008, they spike up. Also, by the way, that window of time, 1999 to about 2006, is following that little six. Have you ever heard that little 6 or 7 year pattern that UFOs kind of go in cycles? Like the sightings go in cycles. Well, It follows that pattern. There's a little curve. There's a little curvy hump there with the sightings, and then as we get to 2008, it jumps by 100 sightings a year. In 2009, it jumps up from about 300 sightings a year to about 400, and then the average, back in 2010, it goes back down to 300 again, and it stays in that 300 to 400 range until 2012, when it spikes to 648.
Wow. That's very interesting.
And then the next year in 2013, that's when we were in bated breath. I was writing my column at that time, and we were in kind of bated breath. Is the number going to stay up in the 600s, or is it going to come back down to the mean of in the 400s? And it did. It came back down to about 433. But 2014 was 540. So there is a trend upwards. But it's not every year. There's just a general trend going. The whole trend is going up, but no one particular year saying, "Hey, it's been a great year this year. It's going to be bigger next year." That is not the case.
Right, and that was for New York, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What about the national level?
National level. Let me pull that chart up. In fact, I put that up on the internet about a week or so ago. Let me see what I got here.
This is all very interesting.
It is interesting when you start playing with the numbers. It's very interesting, and it's amazing some of the stuff you find. Let me try this USA. I got to find the chart here.
Okay. Yeah, I like it when I can actually see numbers and actually some kind of a flow chart, which I like. That's what you kind of do. You put everything together in a nice business fashion.
This is an all-time chart. This particular one is not the whole United States. Let me go to a different report. I've got an all-time chart, basically, that goes all 50 states plus a couple of the territories. And other than the top 10 states, California's up around 11,000. Everybody else is in all the other heavy hitters are in the 5,500 to 3,500 range. Okay. And then after that, it's down. Everybody's down in the hundreds and coming up to maybe about 2,000 range.
That's interesting.
So there's states that just don't get very much traffic, and there's states that get huge amounts.
Right. So California is one of them.
California is one of them. But, there's been a lot of talk for years that there's people have talked about the idea that there might be a base off the coast of California. People have talked about down around San Diego or someplace like that. So it's anybody's guess.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. What about Nevada?
Nevada was nothing interesting.
Interesting.
It was. I'd done a chart a couple of weeks ago, 100 years. Hang on a second. I'm trying to bring something up for you here. And there was a chart that I put up on the internet for a couple of friends of mine, and I had all these people come back to me. Well, what about Nevada? We have all kinds of sightings out here. And when I pulled up their chart, it just wasn't. They were lackluster. And so, well, we see him so much. This is the answer the guy told me. He was complaining with me. He says, but we have so many, we don't bother to report them. I said, well, if you don't report them, then they don't go in the database. I don't care how many you say you saw.
Right.
You know? It was the same thing I went through with the Pine Bush people. Well, we have tons of sightings down here. 5,000 people saw that thing. I said, yeah, but that's one sighting.
Right.
It's not 5,000 sightings. It's one sighting. 5,000 people saw it.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, that's the big difference, and that's the deal. I'll have that chart for you. Keep me going. Keep
All right. Yeah, I was going to
here.
ask you also about Puerto Rico.
What about Puerto Rico?
Well, there's supposed to be a lot of activity around there, UFO-wise, and I was just curious if you had any information on that spiking.
Actually, I do. I do have a little bit. What I noticed, and I'm talking to myself here because I'm trying to find that number for you.
Okay.
Mass sighting. No. Trying to find Nevada for you. I thought Nevada West was here. No, I don't. Oh, wait. Top 10 states. Here we go.
Okay.
It'll take a second for it to come up. Nevada. First thing on Nevada. Like I said, everybody says, well, there's tons of sightings out there. And, you know, we know they got test site out there, you know, testing experimental aircraft, things like that. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind out there. But, again, if people don't report, and here's the numbers here. Okay, I'll give you kind of a quick flow of the numbers.
Okay.
In this chart, this was using National UFO Reporting Center data only from 1999 to 2014, okay? 9,350 for California. Florida had 4,631. Washington State had 4,184. Make sure you bring me back to Washington. I got a little story to tell you about Washington State.
Okay.
Texas, 3,600. New York State, about 3,100. Remember, this is just National UFO Reporting Center. When you add in the MUFON numbers, they go up a bit. Arizona was 2,850. Bring me back to Arizona, too. I got a cute story to tell you there.
Okay.
Let's see. Pennsylvania is 2,600. Illinois, 2,600. Ohio, 2,500. And Michigan, about 2,000, let's say. Okay. And like I said, I put this chart up on one of the UFO boards on Facebook, and somebody said, well, what about Nevada? And I did a real quick check at Nevada, and it was, you know, it's in the 600, 700, 800 sightings in that 14, 15-year period. It wasn't anything that really had my attention.
Right.
Now, another one that was kind of funny, though, was Arizona. When I was down at the International UFO Congress down in Phoenix last February, I kept having the local people from, remember I'm a news reporter, so I was interviewing people on it. The Phoenix Club was always telling me, oh, yeah, we have all these UFO sightings here. Oh, my God, this place is a hotbed, you know. And, you know, I hear that a lot from different people, and most of the time when I crank the numbers, there's nothing too impressive about their location. Okay? There's a lot of what I'm going to call enthusiastic exaggeration.
Right.
Well, Phoenix has something to crow about. Phoenix has something to crow about. I'll give you a flavor of that in a moment. Let me bring the slide up because it's an amazing, amazing story here. In fact, I just cranked that number it was kind of an experiment about a week or two ago. Let's see, where's Arizona here? So I forgot that you were calling me tonight, so I didn't have all my charts ready to go. But I got.
Sorry, I'll just yap along, and I do want to ask you about Utah as well. I'm sure probably nothing major out of that one, but I was just curious.
Utah does have some cool stuff.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, they do. They do have some cool stuff. Now, the one I'm looking for right now is Arizona, right? Okay, where is Arizona? Okay, I'm going to do a different search here.
Okay. And then also I'll get you back to Washington State, too.
Okay, Arizona. And the thing with Arizona was Phoenix was the hot spot. And there they are, Arizona hotspots. And it works out like this. The map's coming up. I broke it down by county. Again, I was strictly National UFO Reporting Center data. I have to emphasize this. Their numbers are more easily available on the web. You could just download them. But the MUFON data, you have to go through. You have to go through MUFON to get the data. Mm-hmm. All right, the different counties in Arizona. Now you know about the up around Dulce. There's all that talk. There's a base up there and everything. Right. Well, based on, I don't have the studies for the other 4 states, the other 3 states of Four Corners there, right there at the upper right-hand corner of Arizona, where it touches Utah and Utah and Wyoming and New Mexico. Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing the traffic that everybody says it's supposed to have. I only had, in that 14-year period, 40 reported sightings for Four Corners, okay, which is kind of weird. Right. But Phoenix, all the rest of the states, the rest of the state was maybe, in the 2-digit numbers, maybe just breaking into a couple of hundred in that county, okay? The name of the county is pronounced, I'm going to probably mess it up rather badly, Maricopa County, which is where Phoenix is, 1,823 sightings in 14 years. Wow. It's the only 4-digit county I've come across so far.
That's pretty high.
The next biggest county, 2 counties in the state of Arizona, was Pima County, which is to the south, had about 400, and then Yacapaya, which is north of the Phoenix County, and that is had about 277. Everybody else was pretty much like in the 25, 30s, 80s range. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So Phoenix has a huge amount of sighting reports.
Certainly does. Now that's interesting when you can look at all of this and see which one is more active than the others.
It's especially interesting when you can crank these things on, get them into some kind of graphic system and then go look at them. That's the real key here. Now the other one I was going to look up for you was the what was the other one we were talking about a minute ago? It was
not Utah, or was it Puerto Rico, or no?
No, Puerto Rico got next to nothing.
Okay.
Even though I've heard a lot of reports about them, I've got next to nothing in Puerto Rico.
Okay. I did mention Utah. I think you mentioned that's pretty...
Utah, I haven't done an extensive study on that one yet. I'm trying to pull up for you is that there's a... I was trying to pull up the spread from Nevada, but I can't find it. The key, first thing, Washington State. Mm-hmm. Washington State has had, you hear about Roswell, okay? And people tend to think all this stuff happened with Roswell, started with Roswell. No, it started back with that guy, Ken Arnold, about a month before. He was a Washington State senator, and he was flying through the mountains and in his private aircraft, and he saw these a formation of shiny circular craft flying along. Mm-hmm. Okay, he's the famous guy who got it all started. In that month, from middle of June through about the middle of July, they had something unusual going on in the press. UFO sightings being phoned in from 38 states.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, and the news clippings I have from the New York Times of those 3 weeks support it. And, of course, the New York Times reporters are laughing at it and everything. And, our scientists haven't seen anything, so we think it's everybody's imagination, everybody's crazy, and everybody's had too much to drink. Ha, ha, ha. Okay. But when they interviewed one particular Air Force general who at the time, it was not the Air Force yet, it was still the Army Air Corps, There was a particular Air Force journal, Carl, I can't remember his last name, I think it was Strasberg or something like that. He, at the time, was the head of the Army Air Corps. And he came back around the first week of July, and the press kind of mobbed him as they used to do in those days. And, hey, wow, what do you think about all the UFO sightings? Oh, guys, hey, I've been on a fishing trip up in Washington State. Well, I did a little study based on something Stanton Friedman put me on to a guy back in the 60s. He was an actor, and he was an old NICAP guy. And he was an actor in a traveling road crew, or a road troupe, okay? So he worked at night, so he would spend his days in whatever city he was in, going through the library and going through their microfilm and their morgue of newspapers back during the window of time of June of 1947 and July of 1947, looking for any references to local UFO sightings in whatever town he went to. Okay, and he wrote a report, and there's a PDF of it somewhere on my computer. And if you look at his charts, the spike on the UFO sightings started in mid to late June. We don't hear anything about Roswell until about the 8th of July, and it's over with by the 10th. Right. You know, the press gets kind of blown off. Oh, hey, guys, it was a weather balloon. Right? I showed these charts to some friends of mine. I said, what does this look like? And they got looking at it, and the one conclusion we all came away from the table was Starship down. Like whatever crashed happened earlier than the date the Army told us about. And there's stories that say that they think the Roswell and the Aurora crashes actually happened maybe back a couple of weeks earlier in June. Okay? And Brass only found them recently, type of thing. And there's that talk. Well, all these sightings came in right around that time when we're wondering, gee, these two ships supposedly hit each other and crashed in their respective locations, one outside of Roswell, one out in Aurora. And gee whiz, maybe this was all these additional sightings was basically, you know, if an airplane goes down, we send out the Civil Air Patrol and the Army and the Air Force and, the National Transportation Safety Board and everybody else got planes out there beating the bushes looking for the crashed plane, right? Well, that's what this looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
And it's a really interesting story. Almost nobody ever gets to hear because modern media that we see, especially on the upper channels and cable, always tells you that everything to do with modern ufology started with Roswell, and that is not the case.
Right.
It started well before that during World War II and then into the late 40s, and it really took off right after we dropped the bomb. And then in the early 50s, there was a huge flurry of it. I've got a copy of Life magazine that was published 2 weeks before I was born in 1952. And it's got a picture of Marilyn Monroe on the front of it. It's a lovely picture of Marilyn Monroe in black and white. And in the upper right-hand corner of the front page, it says, "Is there a case for interplanetary saucers?" And the topic was talked about not in a pop sense, but in a realistic sense. Are we being visited by other people from other places? And it was a very serious article. And they had good information from the Air Force, and they had interviews with generals, and it was all very above board. And it wasn't until we get into the Project Blue Book, and we get into the Condon report that everything gets blown off. Everybody's an idiot or a drug addict, or it's their imagination. These aren't the droids you want.
Right.
You know? And ever since then, you try to talk to anybody in the press, and they generally will treat you like you're a nut. Somebody asked me at work and said, "Hey, I hear you write a column on UFOs." I said, "I do." He says, "Why, are all these people who report them drug addicts or something?" And I looked at them and I said, "Wait a minute. This is eyewitness testimony. These people are phoning in. This will get you convicted in any state in the country, and you're calling these people crackpots?" You know, what has happened here? The misinformation campaign by whatever agency has done a very good job of making it very difficult to communicate this topic matter.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yep. Well, you bring a lot of integrity to this whole area, which I'm really pleased to hear. It's interesting you're talking about Roswell, but it was kind of a distraction, wasn't it? Seems like it was anyway.
Yeah, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
It cooled things off because one of the things, if they did really, I always kind of kept the jury out personally about Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the jury was always out for me. I wasn't 100% sure until about 3 years ago when I read this paper by this actor who put all this information together back in the late 60s, mid 60s. And I looked at this, and when I saw all this other information, and I went back and found press clippings to support what he was talking about, I thought to myself, good grief, Roswell wasn't the cherry on the cake. It was all of this other activity in the weeks leading up to what happened at Roswell, supposedly what we heard happened at Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
And a majority of the sightings were up in Washington State.
That's really interesting.
And that's where that general was for a week. And he said he was fishing. And he said he was fishing in a particular place. And I looked that place up, and it was less than 50 miles from where all the sightings were.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. So this is called forensic press work. You go
Love
back
it.
in there, and I literally had to go and get the microfilm. I have access to 2 really good college libraries that had all of this stuff, and I was able to go dig it out. And microfilm machines these days used to be, you looked it up in microfilm, it was usually a negative on the thing, and you push the button, there was some little chemical process back there to process it onto some kind of cheap photographic paper of some sort. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, what they've got is they've got a little machine hooked up to an imaging system, and you plug a thumb drive into the side of this thing, and you crank your microfilm through, watching it on a computer screen. And when you find what you want, you draw a little text box around the thing, press a button, and it saves it. It saves in a PDF form on your thumb drive.
Oh, nice.
It's very, very handy for research work.
Oh, absolutely. That's pretty sweet. Yeah, I like the way you do that forensic press work. That's pretty awesome. What about, was it 1952 and they had the all the activity around the White House?
Okay, that's referred to as the Washington Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept having what I'm going to call like the orange fireballs, the bright lights that were flying in triangular formations. Mm-hmm. And then they'd send up a bunch of jets to go chase them. And as soon as the jets got into the air, these guys they all scrambled or they winked out. And the radar center, the air traffic control center at Washington National Airport, was tracking these things on radar. Okay, mm-hmm. And as soon as the jets went up, these things all winked out. As soon as the jets flew around a little bit, flew back to Andrews Air Force Base and landed, they all winked back in. And they're hovering over the Capitol and everything else. And the Air Force, again, took this attitude, well, don't be upset. And again, they took this sort of, these aren't the droids you want. You didn't see anything, oh, it was radar shadows, and all this stuff, it was baloney.
Right.
The big problem with the military in those days is they just didn't want to admit that there was something out there that they couldn't explain and couldn't keep up with.
Right. So you definitely think they were not ours, not some kind of an reverse engineered craft, but literally something off planet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wondering about
that. I really
that.
do. There was something really out there doing it. They had some incredible sightings back in the early 50s. And I didn't become conscious of UFO sightings until I was like in the middle, early to mid 60s, when I was about 12, when I saw my first one, and my parents pointed it out to me, and I watched it for almost 25, 30 minutes, and then it just kind of gone. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. A big silver ball in the sky, hung in a clear blue sky for upwards of 40 minutes, and then when it left, it left like Star Trek, man, gone. And
it was there for 40 minutes.
Yeah,
that's a long time.
Yeah,
that's
just
pretty
sat
cool.
out there in the western sky, and it was amazing. And
That's awesome.
Nobody reported. I've checked the records. Nobody's reported it. It was never in the paper, and anything like that. It's weird. It's weird.
Do you think you were a contactee or anything? Do you remember having missing time with that or anything?
Not with that one, no.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Now, people have asked me over the years, now, do you have to take a break at the top of the hour?
Yeah, we do, in about 5 minutes, plus or minus, yeah.
Okay, very, very good, just making sure. Over the years, how do I say this? Over the years, I've had a lot of people say to me, well, have you ever seen anything? I said, yeah, I've had about 5 real serious sightings in my life, personal, up close and personal, in one way, shape, or form, okay? But I said the thing that really, I had the opportunity to see something in a technical sense that, given my what I'm going to call my electromagnetic training, the physics involved, and it had to do with the Willie Muir film and video. Okay, you know who Willie is, from Switzerland. And I mean that's always been something that's bugged me, oh, this guy faked this thing, and yeah, right, the one-armed guy did it with his one hand and his camera, I mean. He
received a lot of flack. You talk about Billy Meyer, right?
Yeah. Well, the deal is I watched his film footage. Okay, a friend of mine had a VHS tape with a whole bunch of his footage on it, and his film footage, and then they had another videotape produced that had samples that were shot on early videotape. And I saw a particular phenomena because I was trained in film, I was trained in editing. I tend to see things down at the frame level. Like, so if anybody, you go to the movies and if they've got a subliminal in there, I can usually see it because I'm kind of trained to see these things at the frame level.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw something. And I said, wait a minute. And then I backed it up. I slowed down the recorder and backed it up a couple of frames at a time. And I noticed that for a 3-frame window, there was a change in the illumination of the screen. Well, on the film, that was one thing. On the video, it was the same thing. And I said, wait a minute. There is something electromagnetic going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I tried to explain it to a couple of my UFO friends, and everybody blew me off. And then about, this is in the early 90s, and then back around 2002, 2001, there was that one space shuttle footage. I had that thing darting around out there, and then it looks like somebody shoots a laser beam up from the planet, and the thing darts off real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I saw the same phenomena there. The same electronic signature. It looks like they somehow changed the local physics of the local space, and it changes the interference pattern of the light coming into the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a physics thing. It's a high school physics thing. But but to someone with a trained eye, it's there.
Right.
And I said, wait a minute. Those guys changed something with the local physics of the local space for 0.3 of a second.
Wow.
And it was visible back on the 1970s film footage that Billy shot, and his video that he shot, and this footage that was shown with the space shuttle.
That's really interesting.
They say was ice crystals.
Oh, really?
So if anybody, when people say to me, well, have you ever seen anything that gives you proof? And I said, yeah, I have, but you'd have to have the same trained eye I've got.
Right.
I've shown it to a couple film editors that have looked at it to see things the same way I do, and they go, oh, my God, But, the average person just sees a little bit of static on the screen and think it's just the videotape's not being read well or something. That's what they think.
Yeah.
But it's been a consistent pattern whenever those ships would take off into their very fast mode, this phenomena would appear in the film footage for 3 frames.
That's excellent. You have an eye for detail. There's no doubt about it. You make a really good detective, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're hired. Hey, we're going to head for a break, everybody. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back here. My special guest is Cheryl Costa. This is Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and this is the Dark Matter Digital Network. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dark Matter Digital Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. This is Hyperspace, and I'm here with my very special guest, Cheryl Costa. Cheryl, you with me?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. It's such a pleasure to have you on, as always. I just love your information. It's so detail-oriented, and I greatly appreciate it. So thank you for joining us. Hey, I was going to ask you about, are you familiar with, and you probably are, electronic fog or the phenomenon? Are you, have you looked into that at all?
What is it?
They call it electronic fog, supposedly. It's some kind of a conductive, I think it's like a fog that creates kind of a donut around a ship or a craft. They've theorized about this, apparently, that it has something to do with, they quoted it around some of the craft around the Bermuda Triangle, for example. I was wondering if you're familiar with it at all.
No, I'm not.
Okay. I don't know. You might want to check it out.
I know of it, but I know next to nothing about it.
Okay. I didn't know anything about it either. I've been kind of digging into it to see what it's about and if there's any truth to some of the technology associated with it. But anyways, just I thought I'd throw that at you just to see if you knew, because you were talking about the electromagnetics. And to me, it seems like that might be some kind of a phenomenon associated with UFO anomalies, or maybe a portal or something.
Yeah, it might be. Now,
okay.
You were asking about Utah earlier.
Right.
You have a familiarity with Utah? Okay, I got a little chart here. Again, this is National UFO Reporting Center data. From 1999 to about 2011, the average yearly sighting is around 30 sightings.
Oh, okay. That's not too active.
That's it. Now, in 2012, it shot up to 108, and it was 80 the year after, and 70 the year after that. So something changed there in 2012, and it's remained that way since.
That's interesting. So then again, you kind of wonder if something on a dimensional level shifted in frequency to create more of the anomalies and the UFO sightings.
Something definitely changed there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I looked up is I found the other Arizona chart I wanted to tell you about during the break. And it was, now, please let me find it again. Darn it. I had it right here. I went to the Utah, and then I missed it. It's here someplace. But it was a very interesting chart because it was, it showed a similar pattern. There it is. It showed a very similar pattern for Arizona, where they go along with a very, very low amount of sightings, and suddenly it goes very high. Here it is. Give you an example. In 1999, they were 95. 2000, they were 212. And then 2001 through around 2003, they hovered around about 115. And then 2004, 2005, it went up to 200.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2006, 2007, through about 2010, it hovered at around 130, 140. And then in 2011, it went to 161, 2012, 206, 2013, 231, and then it's up to, in 2014, it went up to 299.
That's interesting.
So they're on a climb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely on a climb, without a doubt. It does kind of make me wonder if it has something to do with frequencies, dimensional space, ley lines, something that's kind of piercing dimensions or something that's opening up through frequency. It's quite interesting. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you about the Hawaiian Islands as well. Have you looked into that much?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I do have a little bit of a snapshot. I'll pull it up and I'll tell you what I've got here.
Okay.
It's Hawaiian Islands is kind of weird because you have 4 different islands. The 4 islands are essentially 4 different counties for all intents and purposes. And that becomes an issue because they're not kind of set up governmentally about the same as other places. Here we go. I'm going to have the Hawaiian Islands only had all-time count for them is about 462 sightings logged.
Oh, okay.
That's not a lot.
Mm-mm. No, not at all. It's supposed to be a hot spot, from what I understand. But yeah, that's
well, nobody's logging it because
right.
if you were to spread that number over 15, that's probably an all-time number. 462, that's an all-time number. But if you spread it over just even 15 years, that's only about 30 sightings a year.
Mm-hmm.
So unless people are reporting all this stuff to MUFON, they're certainly not reporting it to the National UFO Reporting Center. That's for sure.
Right. And what about captains of boats and ships? Do they ever call in a UFO sighting?
Perhaps they do. They're not calling it into us. That's for
okay.
sure.
I was just curious.
Now, let's talk about that a minute. Prior to about the mid-'90s, how people got UFO sightings around was probably in the 50s, 60s, maybe early 70s. It was all press clippings being mailed into somebody that was collecting these things. You'd read about them in a magazine or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sometimes that same person, there was a guy out in like Ohio, I think it was. He had a telephone number. You could call into his answering machine, and he had a tape recorder answering machine. And I saw him a couple of times on CBS News, kind of thing, And people would call and report what they saw. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 60s and 70s, that was pretty much it. Okay. After Blue Book closed up, MUFON formed, and that was kind of like the early version of MUFON. Okay? When you get up, and it was like that through the 80s, again, it was paper clips, faxing stuff in. As we got into the 80s, you start in early 90s, you had those old bulletin board systems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? People could dial into these bulletin boards, early CompuServe, early American Online, that kind of thing, and do all this stuff. And then by the mid to late 90s, we all started having broadband connection. And then the World Wide Web was kicking in about that point. So that's when you start seeing a serious increase in the amount of reporting. And then as it gets over to around 2003, 2004, when MUFON and National UFO Reporting Center bring their databases online, where you actually have an online interface, that's when reporting starts to really take off. Remember, I said a lot of these trends tend to be an artifact of reporting.
Mm-hmm, right.
And then so when I started doing my study for New York State, I used 1999 to the current year only because 1999 was the first really stable year. Because there was a big slope coming up, and then kind of leveled off a little bit for a while. Mm-hmm. And that's why I used 1999. The reason I'm using year 2000 to 2015 is a nice round number. Mm-hmm. 15 years in the 21st century, and that's
right.
That's a good number to work with.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's a good window of time in the illusion, without a doubt. And what about? I know we kind of touched about this in the past, or touched on this in the past a little bit about what was the earliest UFO sighting that's been recorded that you have a record of?
For New York State, it's 1790.
Okay.
And it was up in Scolari County, which is up near Albany. And it was a Dutch settler. You got to remember what it was like back in those days. It was quite literally the wilderness. You had Dutch settlers up and down the Hudson Valley, setting up farms and things like that. And this particular guy, he reported it 2 years later at the county seat, which was in Carlisle. But you got to remember, people didn't get around easily in those days. Mm-hmm. And he swore out an affidavit in the county seat a couple of years later. He reported seeing a very bright object coming in, and a roaring sound coming in from the northern sky. It was about sunset. He said he was playing his fiddle on his front porch of his cabin, and he heard this roaring sound and a brightness coming from the northern sky. And it was, again, twilight. And then this thing came down a couple hundred yards away from his house or his cabin, and he said it was maybe 100 yards long, had a taper like a snake, and it was hot and sparking. It hovered above the ground about as high as a horse, and it moved at the speed of a galloping horse across the field, hovering above the ground. He said, and then when it got to the point where it reached the front of it, kind of looked, if you stretch your hand out, make your hand like a claw, he says that's kind of what it looked like. It looked like a tree that was uprooted, and that appeared to be the front of it. And when it got to a rise of a hill, it met the rise and maintained its altitude of a couple feet off the ground and just went up and over the hill, and that was the last he saw of it. He said the smell of what smelled like burnt tar and sulfur reeked in his house for a couple of weeks.
That's interesting.
From the smell of it when it came and landed in the field about 100 yards from his house.
Right. So do you think that's something more like some kind of a meteor or something?
Well, he referred to it as a meteor, but a meteor would have come down and gone plop, right? How many meteors come down and hover over the ground and then appear to be under intelligent control and glide across the countryside? Yeah,
that's true, isn't it?
I think it was a probe myself, but that's me,
Yeah, cruising along there. That's quite interesting. Yeah. What are some other ones?
There are some other ones from other states, and not really on top of many of them.
Okay.
There were a lot of, we all know about the one, a lot of us know about the one down in Texas where one of them hit a windmill. Okay, and supposedly the dead aliens buried in the town cemetery, There's a guy up in Washington State. He had a picture taken of him in 1920 out on his farm. And in the background, you can see this bright, shiny object hovering out there in the sky behind him. 1920s picture.
Wow.
So when I hear people say to me, "Oh, this UFO stuff that just started back in 1947, right?" I said, "No, guys, it's been going on since biblical times, And I think that's what bothers me sometimes is a lot of people have bought into the idea that this is just a modern phenomena, it's hysteria, and it's a little bit of craziness, and there's no such thing as these things, and that's wrong. There's art out there from Berlin, what was it, Nuremberg, Germany, from 1561. Star Wars kind of battle over the city, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so there's a lot of evidence out there that the ancient aliens type, and I think if people dig into their own state histories, they will find that there is amazing stuff that has gone on. Here in New York State, we had a lot of stuff that happened through the 19th century here. There was the sighting of a flaming cross in the sky in New York City around 1860. There was the two fireballs that were viewed from, initially people thought they were meteors. They were initially viewed up in Albany, New York, and then they were also seen in New York City. They were also seen in Philadelphia. They were also seen in Washington, D.C., reported in the papers, We have press clippings of these things. It was reported all the way down to Norfolk, Virginia, when it was lost into a cloud bank with these two huge flaming balls. Well, the thing is, we saw the Russians here, 3 years ago, they had that meteor asteroid come in. It was like it came in, boom, and that was it, right? Most of the time we see a shooting star and says, "Hey, look," ooh, and that's it, right? These things, the New York City reporter and the Philadelphia reporter said something very similar, that it took over a minute for it to cross the horizon.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, a friend of mine and I sat down, a pilot friend of mine and I sat down, and we worked the numbers of how wide that aperture of space, and early evening, the horizon, seeing the northern horizon going to the southern horizon, out there flying, say, across the eastern sky at around twilight. How many miles does that represent? Well, it represents about 60 miles, nautical miles. Okay, fine. For an object across that would have been flying somewhere between 1,700 and 3,000 miles an hour. Well, that's well within the speed of one of our modern fighter jets.
Exactly.
It's also a speed, the 3,500 speed, 3,500 miles per hour speed, is very, very typical of what a shuttle speed is after it's gotten into the lower atmosphere. And it took, from the time reporters said they reported it around 9:25 up in Albany, New York, and it was reported around 9:35 down in Norfolk, Virginia, okay, and in between cities, okay, and that's 495 miles as the crow flies. Well, again, we can't crank that number back and made adjustments, and we think it was flying around 2,000 miles an hour.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, that is not a meteor.
Right.
Okay, that sounds like a re-entry event or an entry event.
Yep, certainly does. Has there any big documentation with craft like actually battling with each other? I know you mentioned the battling aspect. Were they ever battling against each other? Has anybody had an eyewitness account of that?
Not in the States, no.
Okay.
But in Europe, yeah, there's twice. It was what was it? 1561, and it was 1561 over Nuremberg, and then 5 years later over Basel, Switzerland.
Okay.
And it was like a Star Wars battle.
That's really interesting.
All we have is an early broadsheet, which was the closest thing to like a newspaper in those days, and that describes of what it was. They came up, that people were getting up, at dawn, and there was this whole thing going on over the city, and it terrified them. They had no idea what was going on. They thought it was the end of the world. Okay, India, this stuff is written in Hindu stories, and those things read like Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
And so different people have said they've seen different things battling and things like this. If we never see it here in the States, but I've heard stories of people seeing it down in South America. They've had some really, really strange occurrences in South America, and so who knows? Until we have disclosure, we won't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever be receiving that. So I guess we're as close to disclosure as anybody else is, just telling, being eyewitnesses.
Let's talk about that in a minute. I think we are getting close to disclosure. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think within the next 5 years we're to have disclosure.
Well, that's nice.
That's my personal view. I know that there's a tremendous lobbying effort going on with Steve Bassett's efforts down there with PRG. He's literally, they sent those citizen hearings. They sent DVDs of the citizen hearings that were held a few years ago, and they boxed them all up and made DVD copies, and they put a set with every single representative and staff of Congress and the Congressional Senate on the Hill got a copy.
Yeah.
Okay. And they've been lobbying. PRG has been lobbying Congress very strongly, and I'm kind of hoping the book I'm working on is going to be one of those things. That maybe I can go on Ellen or something like this and say this stuff is real, and here are the numbers, and nobody's told you. The newspapers and the television rarely tells you about this stuff, right? Well, gee, why? Who are they in cahoots with? And
right.
That's my tone. A lot of people believe, because I have people all the time say to me, "Well, New York State, we don't have any UFO sightings here." I said, "We average about 500 a year." And they look at me and they give me one of those deer in the headlights look, and say, "You're kidding me." I said, "No, really. What would you like to see? What counties they're in?"
That's great. Yeah, I love the way you keep track of that stuff. It's awesome. So, what about contactee experiences? Insofar as we have these sightings themselves. What about possible abduction?
We got a good one. Good one. I wrote an article about this a couple of months ago. To your listeners, I write a weekly column for the Syracuse New Times, okay? And it's been a weekly column now for 2.5 years. And it's about UFO sightings, principally in New York. We call it New York skies, okay? I had a couple, every now and then people contact me and say, hey, would you come over to our backyard barbecue? We're going to have our uncle there, and he wants to tell you about his UFO sighting, you know? And usually when I meet these people, I can usually tell the ones that are pulling my leg and the ones who are telling me the truth, because the ones who are pulling me truth, it's like they've had a PTSD experience. You can see it in their eyes. They're living it again.
Right.
You can see it in their eyes. All right, well, these two little, I don't want to call them little old ladies, they're probably my age. They're in their 60s, early 70s. And they called me up and said they had a weird experience. All right, let's talk. So they had been up to the lake at the cottage they rent, and they had come home after a week, and they were unpacking the car, and one of the two ladies went to go down cellar to her pantry. She has a pantry down there where she stores a lot of the bulk of her dry goods and things, okay? So she starts to go down to the cellar. The other lady was out in the dining room. She had a flash in her mind of a little bald man in a blue jumpsuit. Is what she had a flash in her mind. And just as she had that flash in her mind, her partner, who was going down the stairs, let off with a blood-curdling scream.
Wow.
She ran to the cellarway, and the lady who had been going down the cellar, there's like a landing. The steps go down a little couple of steps, and there's like a little landing. Mm-hmm. She's kind of like sitting on the landing, stretched back against the steps, and she's pointing at what looks like bats dancing around her. Well, the other lady saw it too, but she never really saw them really as bats. They were just these brown squiggly things flapping around kind of like bats. Mm-hmm. So they grabbed the lady who was on the steps, pulled her out of there, and they slammed the door thinking, gee, maybe bats had come down the chimney or something, okay?
Right.
A day or so later, they went down cellar, with tennis rackets, expecting to have to hit a bat or something, looking for guano, looking to see if there's any bat droppings or anything like that. Nothing. Okay, nothing. A couple of days later, they got talking about it, and they got talking about what they saw. And when the one said, look, I saw this guy in a blue jumpsuit, little bald man in a blue jumpsuit, and then you saw bats. Well, there was this guy talking out at, his name is, I can't remember his first name, but McClellan is the last name. Mm-hmm. He was speaking at the 2014 International UFO Congress, and he was talking about, how a lot of people who have had an abduction experience have this issue with remembering like a bird face.
Right.
Okay, well, he was explaining that there are archetypes in our subconscious. And what they think some of these grays are doing telepathically to kind of cloak themselves, they transmit this image to our subconscious mind, bird, 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 or owl, owl, owl.
Right, that's a popular one.
And then the idea being it cloaks it. And so what's the person come back away with? They end up telling their friends the next day, I saw a 4-foot owl. Mm-hmm. Okay,
right.
And he had a cardboard cutout of what he thought a 4-foot owl looked like. It was pretty scary, but the point was that they think that that's how some of these grays cloak themselves, because they can touch this subconscious. Well, bats. I talked to a lady who's into psychology, and she told me that bats are also part of our archetypes, as are snakes and lizards. Mm-hmm. Okay, and perhaps that little bald guy, that little alien guy, for whatever reason, was in their cellar, cloaked his way out by projecting that into her subconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it has bugged these ladies since fall when they told me about it.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of a creepy little thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, when I was at the International UFO Congress, they have a morning meeting for experiencers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For your listeners, experiencers is the term they prefer to be called versus being called abductees. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And normally press would not be allowed there, so I asked for permission. I said, "Look, I'll leave my press credentials upstairs. Can I just come and sit in as a friendly observer?" And she cleared it. The therapist cleared it and said, "Yeah, sure, great, you can come down." And I was expecting to see 15, 20, maybe 30 people down there. They had like 150 people in there.
Wow.
And as they did round robins, different people sharing some of their experiences, and over a period of, they met every day, kind of like an AA meeting, okay? And the stories that I heard were just absolutely stunning.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice a pattern, Cheryl, with the information?
Well, yes and no. There are some people that were there who were just coping with it, and thank God there's other people like me. Oh, my God, I don't feel so alone anymore, that mentality, the first-timers, so to speak. And then there are people who have been there quite a long time with this stuff, made peace with it, and pretty much could, put it in perspective. And there were a handful of those folks. And like I said, it was interesting to hear. And in fact, Travis Walton came down and said if he was at that convention, he came down and shared a few thoughts with the group.
Oh, nice.
It was a very interesting meeting. I went to 2, maybe 3 meetings. I learned an immense amount. Nothing I can write about.
Right. Because
I gave my word I wouldn't write about what they told me. But it was eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
And my spouse she came with me, and I think the word she used was, it wasn't creeped out wasn't the word, but boy, it certainly rattled her.
Interesting.
Especially when you see the sincerity in their faces, and you can see, maybe their hands start shaking as they tell you the story of what happened to them, things like this. It's been quite interesting, and they're starting to be. The experiencers, from what I've observed, are starting to organize now. They're starting to sort of come out of the closet a little bit about the thing now that there's numbers of them. And they're starting to be a little more brave about it and come out and talk about it in numbers. They feel there's safety in numbers and things like this. And I'm happy to see that. For a long time, they were stigmatized,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's nice that they have a place to go and communicate. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I still think, the mainstream is still kind of skews everything, but still, when you look at some of the stuff they're putting out on the illusion of television, I mean, a lot of it parallels the contactee experience or the experiencers in general. So, and we have X-Files coming back on the scene, this January or something?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
That was a good series. I enjoyed it. The writing was very good in that, and I always enjoyed it.
Well, doesn't it kind of make you wonder where they got a lot of their scripts? Insofar as data goes, contactees
the guys they call the 3 goofy guys there that he uses for reference. They call them the lone gunmen, if I remember correctly. The guys that they were patterned after are actually live in D.C. The real guys. And they're real guys, and I met them.
Oh, nice.
This is back in the mid '90s when I was part of another radio program. I was part of a radio comedy team, and we did do some serious subjects from time to time on the show. And I got a chance to interview these guys and brought them on the show. And the other hosts of the show were not as kind to them as I was, but they were very, very, very interesting guys, and the actors that play them on the X-Files are more or less, there's a strong resemblance to them.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that they were actually real people.
They're based on 3 real guys, yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah. They're, like I said, they were an interesting bunch. They were very stodgy, though. You had to have a direct question, and if they didn't want to answer it, they didn't answer it. So, but like I said, they were good guys.
That's good. Well, it's good to know there's actually some real people out there who mirror the actors, so to speak.
Yeah, there was. I was talking to you earlier I found a slide. It was interesting. The Central Atlantic states are like New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. Okay. Now, 1999 to 2014. Now, this is just a swag number. Don't really count the number because they're not clean, okay, because it was just one database, okay?
Okay.
National UFO Reporting Center for New York was around 3,000, okay? Pennsylvania was around 2,600. New Jersey was about 1,500. Maryland was about 900. Delaware was about 200. And the District of Columbia only about 112.
That's interesting.
Those are what we would call the Central Atlantic states. And I find it interesting because a lot of people would think that, there's, Washington, D.C., there must be a ton of sightings there, and there aren't.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to go over there.
Yeah.
What about Canada? Have you done any estimates around there or checked that out?
I've peeked at it, but remember, they've only got about, 6 major cities in Canada? And the rest of the country is pretty much wilderness.
Right.
So I asked my spouse about the idea of maybe including the Canada in the study. We decided to do that as a separate publication.
Oh, that would be good.
Maybe next year. Okay. Maybe do a couple of other countries, provided the data is available.
Yeah, that's part of it, isn't it? What about Alaska?
And we clean up the numbers were relatively small.
Okay, that's interesting. I would think they might have activity up there.
Well, you would think so. Let me pull that chart up real quick for you.
Okay.
The numbers were actually rather surprising for me because in proportion. I'll have it up momentarily.
Okay. And also, can you check Colorado? I think we probably touched on that before when you were on the show, but I was curious.
Colorado's not as big as you might think. But I'll tell you, I'll have a number for you here in a minute.
Okay.
This is, I can't break it down by year for you, but I can give you a rough, like what they call all-time count. Okay, if California National UFO Reporting Database, again, California was in the 12,000 range, okay? New York State was, again, in the top 10 states. So in New York State, this is to give you perspective, was around 4,000. Ohio, 3,000, okay? Florida, 5,500, okay? And Arizona, about 3,400. That gives you a perspective. The rest of the states, then there's a big drop-off, and it goes down to the 1,500 range, and then there's another big drop-off. It gets literally in the hundreds, okay? And so what was the state you wanted? Alaska?
Yeah.
Alaska, according to the National UFO Reporting Center, only has about 456 logged.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That's an all-time log.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, and what was the other state? There was
I mentioned Colorado, but yeah.
Okay, 1978.
Okay, yeah. I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that surprised me. I thought Colorado would have had bigger numbers than they did. By the way, I'm glancing real quick here at the Canadian numbers. They're all in the triple digits, pretty much in the under 500. In fact, they're all pretty much. Newfoundland, 34 all-time sightings. Nova Scotia, 181. Northwest Territory, 23.
Okay.
Prince Edward Island, 24. Quebec, 102. Puerto Rico, 36.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
So again, I think the low volume for Puerto Rico, because I've had many people tell me that Puerto Rico has a lot of sightings.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is an artifact of reporting. They probably don't know about the database down there.
Possible, yeah. What about Mexico?
Let me see if there's anything for Mexico. No, Mexico's not reflected on this database.
Okay, I would think that they would have some activity. Well, they say they do.
Now, who would probably know that would be that news reporter. I can't remember his name. A Mexican news. This guy's like the Mexican.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Jamie. And he would know. I don't.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Well, I like looking at the statistics to see what's really going on here, and numbers do, it's nice to calculate and see what's really happening if they're accurate, and for the most part, they seem to be.
I think that's the thing that bothers me is I tell people this is, and my wife will be the second one to tell you this. This is what they call gray data.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to check it against.
Right.
Okay. The best I do when I'm working with it is I do try to take out anything that the administrators log as a hoax. Okay, and they've got different ways of logging the hoax on the database. And once I figured out how they were doing it, I'm able to eliminate those records.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very tiny percentage, but I do log them out so they don't mess up the numbers.
Right.
I think the biggest problem for people is they think there's nothing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the average person doesn't believe that there's a lot going on over their head.
Yeah. They're kind of desensitized to some degree.
Yeah. I had a guy at work ask me, he said to me, he says, well, I hear you write that column about UFOs. And I said, well, yeah, I do. And he says, well, they all got to be drug addicts and nuts. And I said, what piece of indoctrinating stuff have you read to think that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I said, what if I told you the numbers are far bigger than that percentage of numbers? You know, oh, I don't believe it, you know.
Right.
And there's people who are quite comfortable. I don't believe it. No one's been able to convince me of it, so I'm not going to believe that there's a possibility of this.
Right. And I guess if they don't believe it, it kind of just, they have tunnel vision at some point.
Well, I'll tell you, they're the first ones that are going to be scared out of their wits when President Obama or whoever gets to do disclosure tells the truth.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to crap their knickers. They really are.
Right. And also, what about the experiencers you were talking about? I mean, I'm sure there are quite a few experiencers out there who don't even log anything online that have all sorts of experiences.
Yeah. I've talked to a few people who, I don't know if you'd heard this, that one of the things that they've figured out with some of the experiencers is that they sometimes have this a particular type of indelible. It shows up under black light mark.
Right. Yes.
On them. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I saw one of those marks recently.
Excellent.
And I said, wow.
Right.
So I'd heard. I forget who it was talking about it out there at the UFO Congress. I'm hoping to go to MUFON this year if possible. If I can't, right now I think writing the book has got me. I'm on a deadline now. I have to get this thing done, so I'm not going to have a lot of time to go out and do a bunch of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and crunching these numbers is not easy because like I said, I have to insert the county data manually.
Right.
And look up a lot of these sightings. I would say 25% of the sightings in any one database are not major cities. They're little whistle stops and road crossings,
mm-hmm.
And
that's tedious.
It is. It is tedious to look them up. I mean, I usually sort all the cities by alphabet, and then as I look them up on the web for their counties, And I've come up with another method. I have a little script I can run against them. It's about 85%, though, is the problem. You still have to look up the whistle stops.
Mm-hmm.
So that part is tedious. And then there's, combining the two databases together in a special spreadsheet. You only keep certain columns. The type of sightings, I didn't realize how badly people's reports are in these databases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The MUFON, it's horrible. Half the time what was it? Was it a disc? Was it a cigar? Was it a glowing ball? Was it a light in the sky? What was it? Half the time they leave it blank, or they don't know. They simply write in, I don't know. People's ability to describe or at least commit and say, this is what I think it was, is miserable.
Right.
So,
is there a place to put footage in there, like video footage?
National UFO Reporter Center, I don't believe gives you the ability to upload anything other than a picture.
Okay.
I'm not even sure you can do that. I know the pictures aren't normally available publicly. On MUFON, you can upload still and motion video, and it's usually associated with the report that you can pull up from their CMS system.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen nice. Some, but remember, when people shoot with their cameras and things, it takes 5 minutes for it to load, and then you see this tiny little pinpoint of light out there darting around,
Right.
It's none of these images ever show up, a real serious craft sitting there or something
right.
like this.
And speaking
I'm waiting to pull one up like that one of these
Yeah.
days, and open one of these up, and there's a black triangle hovering over the guy's house or something,
Right. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I don't know if they have any record of actually having a UFO craft land and actually having footage of the landing or something just sitting there? Is there any record of that?
I have not in the stuff I look at.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. It's always like they're just kind of in motion and people witness them through the skies, but never anything solid insofar as something more tangible where you can actually capture it, landing or something. That would be a stretch, though, I guess.
Well, I had a guy tell me the other day, he says, I don't want to hear about orbs. I don't want to hear about orbs and fireballs. I want to see a substantive technical craft, And I made the joke at the convention when I was doing my presentation. Some people just wouldn't believe it. I think I made the remark. Most people wouldn't believe it unless you pointed out in the parking lot and said, "There's a Clausnian Jaka-class scout ship cracked up in the parking lot."
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't believe it even if it was out there.
Right. Yeah. I think it was a prop from Star Wars or something.
Yeah. They think it's a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that bothers me about what people want for proof. Okay, I had a couple of people write me at the column, so to speak, and they were talking about, well, you don't have any proof. I said, you don't have any proof that I don't have proof.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How can you sit there and tell me that what these other people say they saw is not valid?
Right.
You don't have a frame of reference to tell me, unless you're plugged into the Men in Black who can confirm that they didn't see that thing or something. How do you know? You don't know. And I said, so don't be so fast to dismiss these other people and what they say they have seen. There's too many of them.
Right. I agree. Yeah, sometimes people like to argue for the sake of arguing, not because they're right. So.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the thing, my wife will tell you this, and I wrote an article about this in my column. How are things validated? Okay, things are validated usually by peer-reviewed research. Okay? Well, that's not going to happen because there's no money available for the colleges to do this kind of research.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's done by people doing peer-reviewed journal writing for like one of the major government agencies. Again, there's no money available for the topic matter, and people don't want to risk their careers trying to drum up the money for it, so they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. National Academy of Sciences typically would have tasks for unusual topic matter. They won't touch it. And what did Charles Fort call this stuff? Damned data.
Yeah.
The stuff that nobody will look at. Okay.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, well, it's controlling information, too. There's that aspect of it, controlling data that's multidimensional, so to speak. I mean, it's beyond the norm.
Have you ever read his book?
No. Mm-mm.
Have you ever read his book from around 1919? It's called The Damned Data, Book of the Damned.
No, I haven't.
It's available for free out through the Gutenberg Project. You can download it as a PDF.
Okay.
I brought it down in my Kindle and read it over a period of 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's ranting just like we're ranting. 100 years ago, he's sitting there ranting about the same stuff. Nobody will look at this stuff.
Really?
This X-Files stuff.
Nice.
Nobody will look at it.
That's really unfortunate. Well, obviously there is there's data streams out there that are classified or beyond the word that people don't want to disclose. It's unfortunate. It's almost like they're trying to discourage people from researching beyond the linear world. So. Well,
we have a hard enough problem with them researching stuff within our regular world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at it. Congress, everybody's saying, "Oh my God, why we had all these shootings and everything." Well, they've tried what was it? The American Medical Association classified gunshot wounds as a health issue. And they tried to get money for the CDC to do research about these kinds of shootings, all these mass shootings that Obama's been talking about the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There's like one every day type of thing, okay? And Congress, being in the pocket of the NRA, no money. Okay? And there's no money for UFO research. Or maybe there is, but it's all in a black budget someplace.
Right, yeah.
Okay? So, how do you know? There's another issue. The other issue is even in what I'm going to call the UFO community,
mm-hmm.
just in the UFO community, I'm not even talking the greater paranormal community. There's lots of people who've got a web page, and there's lots of people who've got blogs. But do you see anybody writing papers like we did in college, writing research papers like I'm doing?
Right. Yeah, like more of a technical.
Publishing them?
Yeah. Not
They're
at all.
not doing it. Nobody's doing the research.
Right.
Only a handful of people. There are lots of people in the UFO community going out there and writing books, but you don't see anybody publishing papers.
Mm-hmm.
This book here is my paper.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we need papers like that. We need more of the technical side of it, accurate documentation instead of this other stuff.
Well, when I was at the Congress back in February, I was talking with Stanton Friedman, and I can't remember the lady's name. She manages the Betty and Barney Hill material. Mm-hmm. I can't remember her name, Pamela something. And I was talking to them. We were in the line for dinner, to go through the buffet. And I told Stanton I was thinking about doing my either master's, PhD thesis on UFOs, and I told him I was getting some pushback at the college. And this is, by the way, I'm not a teenager. I'm in my 60s, but I'm catching up with my degree, as they say. Mm-hmm. And I told him I'm getting some pushback on that, and I said the biggest pushback was Dr. Condon's stuff. I would have to cite his paper from 1968 that says, this is all baloney. These aren't the droids you want. Mm-hmm. And there's no money and there's no validity, and this stuff's all in somebody's imagination. That's what this paper more or less came out and said. Mm-hmm. Okay, it wasn't valid. And Stanton looked at me and said, there's been at least 15 or 20 excellent PhD theses that have blown his paper out of the water.
Oh,
okay.
Sure.
This I didn't know. And there's several other people, and Pamela told me several people have done their master's thesis on this stuff, and again, blown this stuff out of the water. So they encouraged me very strongly over dinner, go ahead and go write your thesis.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So that's what this book is. This is going to be my thesis research. No one has done statistical study of U.S. UFO studying for a measured period of time, and it just isn't out there. Or if it is, it's not. It's classified.
Right.
And so nobody in the government. And the joke my wife has been saying is, well, gee whiz, this is something the government should be doing, but they're not. So it falls on the citizen scientists to do it.
That's right. Yeah, I've done that too in covert technology. So yeah, basically we should be getting a nice big fat salary, right, Cheryl? For all that hard work you do in there. There's no doubt about it. Well, I'm so looking forward to having that book come out. I tell you what, I'm really psyched that you're writing it. So that's going to be awesome.
So, but let's take this a step further. When it's done, ideally, I should present it someplace.
Mm-hmm.
But that means I have to get invited to a convention.
Well, surely you'll get invited, right?
One would hope.
Yeah. I can't imagine you not getting invited. Unless it's a boys' club, girls' club.
Maybe some, charts and graphs aren't as sexy as, talking to the guys from the Rendlesham Forest sightings or something.
Well, I like charts and graphs. I'm kind of one of those nerdy, weird ones. I like things like what you put out.
You're not alone. I had people coming up to me and my DVD, the DVD they shot of me down there, they usually have it for you. They have it available about 20 minutes after you present.
Mm-hmm.
And that DVD was one of the hottest sellers for the weekend.
Oh, nice.
From what they told me. Yeah, I had Alejandro came to me at one point and told me that they have to keep restocking the DVDs because they keep selling out there on the table. So I feel good about that.
Oh, absolutely.
So hopefully I'll get invited to something like the Congress again, or possibly the MUFON convention or something like that, to present my paper, because this book is going to be one kick-ass paper. All 50 states, perhaps will include the territories, and it will be charts and graphs showing you how many sightings county to county from 2000 to 2015, not just a summary, but how many per year for any one county. And we'll crunch the data. If the sighting information about, cigars, orbs, triangles, that kind of stuff, if that data holds up, we'll probably put a chart like that in there.
Excellent.
So we're excited about this.
Oh, I'm excited to read it. Absolutely. I'll have to have you back when it goes live, too, so we can talk about it more. When you talk about the black triangles, have you tracked at all how much activity the black triangle is observed, or how many people have observed the black triangle?
No, I don't have good data on that. And the problem I've noticed, and I've tried to do that a little experimentally, when in searching for black triangles in the database. And the problem is if you try to go against the column of what shape was it, right? You see almost none. But then if you go back into the detail of the subject line of the thing, saw a black triangle on while driving down Route 90, But in the description box, they call it a light.
Yeah.
Or they say it's unknown. That's the problem we've got, is that people, what we used to call in the Navy, very bad reporting skills.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so there's no easy way to just go back there and grab that and say, you run the database and say, last year there was, 75 black triangle sightings in New York State. It's not that easy to drag that information out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's understandable. Yeah, and in the old days they had the incident reports, where they'd be very articulate and cut and dry. So some people still write like that. If you come from surveillance,
some people do, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Not everybody who joins MUFON, will say, spends the extra $50 to get the manual and take the test and become an investigator.
Right.
Okay. If they did, we might have better reports. But then again, the average report is coming in from somebody who's not even associated with MUFON or National UFO Reporting Center. Someone just told them, hey, wow, you should report that, And that's what it boils down to. So you're stuck with people's average ability to report what they saw. Most people don't know how to put it into words.
Yeah, that's
especially it's bad enough for an ordinary thing. Ask any cop.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay. But then take it into extraordinary situation with UFO, who knows?
Right. And Cheryl, we're getting ready to wrap this up in about 2 minutes here. I can't believe it.
Plus or minus.
It's been wonderful to have you on tonight. I so appreciate you joining us with your information. It's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. A few months down the road, I might have some cooler information to share with you after I crunch some of this data.
Oh, I love it when you're talking about this information here. And also, let everybody know how to get in touch with you if they want to contact you for anything, and also the website. Let's give them a rundown.
Well, I think the easiest place, let's see, they can write to me at author at CherylCosta.com. Cheryl with a C, CHERYLCOSTA, all one word, .com. Author at CherylCosta.com.
That's excellent. Okay. And, of course, if they want to report a sighting and the illusion of a sighting, they can contact you directly?
No. Don't send me the reports. Their best thing they should do is go to National UFO Reporting Center.org. Okay, you can find them on Google very easily, or go to MUFON.com, National UFO Reporting Center.org or MUFON.com, and both of them have the ability to report a UFO. And there's an little electronic form. You bring it up, and you can be anonymous if you want, and fill in all the information, and you file it, and that's it.
Excellent. Well said. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. And please stay tuned for Dr. J Radio Live coming up here next on the Dark Matter Digital Network, of course. And I think we have just a little bit of time in the illusion, 30 seconds plus or minus. So, Cheryl, I just want to thank you so much again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And I want to thank Keith. And I think we're just about ready to roll out of here. So, do I jump the gun, Keith? I always do, but I think I'll just wait for the music for a second here. Or maybe not. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been great.
Bye-bye.